dollar point. I was in researching my article for the Bohemian, which is the paper I write for, kind of like our version of the Boston Phoenix, which is also a great paper. I saw a very little mentioned paragraph in that 694-page bill, and it's section 3083, otherwise called Increase in Statutory Limits on the Public Debt, subsection B of section 3101 of Title 31 of the U.S. Code. And it amends the code, and I quote, by striking the limitation contained in subsection and inserting in lieu thereof a national debt ceiling of $10 trillion, $6.1 billion. When you subtract the new credit limit from the old, when you subtract the new debt ceiling from the old debt ceiling, you see there's an $800 billion cushion, which is exactly the number that you cite. What the Fed's telling us that this bailout may cost as much as $800 billion?
Absolutely. I mean, this may be the largest taxpayer fraud ever, because it is absolutely a bailout of Fannie or Freddie. They had a $10 billion implicit taxpayer guarantee, and now they have unlimited, as you're saying. And that, and when you ask administration, you ask Congress, well, we don't know, but you're exactly right. What they are saying in the fine print is $800 billion. $800 billion. And it could be over $1 trillion. And that is, where does this end? And, what's even more incredible is that, well, one, let's take a step back. On September 12th of 2000, I actually testified in Congress saying that if you allow Fannie and Freddie to engage in subprime lending, predatory lending, they will be incentivized to do that type of lending and reduce their involvement in prime prime mortgages. And that has actually happened, and the taxpayer would end up bailing them out. Now, I said that back 8 years ago. Well, I wasn't the only one saying that. A lot of people in the industry were fighting Fannie and Freddie, saying, stay out of this subprime lending. Stay out of predatory lending. The government should not have any involvement in that. But, of course, they thought they could make this money, short-term money, but they made the money. And they felt confident enough that they were too big to fail. And they rolled the dice. And they got what they wanted, because they realized that even if they got into this business and they made huge amounts of money for the executives, that the Congress and the administration would not allow them to fail. And they played it perfectly from their point of view. Now the taxpayer has to foot the bill. And even worse, they're still engaging in the same practices that they were doing before.
Why doesn't anybody care? I spent a couple of days in Washington. All we heard was actually it was kind of a kind of orgy of self-congratulations, of bipartisan self-congratulations. Just everyone in Congress patting each other on the back. Hey, we're bailing out these distressed homeowners that are about to be foreclosed on. We're doing the right thing. Blah, 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 blah. How come this $800 billion potential liability is something that gets almost no ink out there in the press?
Well, it's interesting because we had over 20,000 people for 5 days participate in NACA's Save the Dream event. And we counseled people. We actually had a mobile servicing operation. We brought over 1,000 people up to Congress. So people met with Senator Dodd. They met with Barney Frank. And what it says is all of Congress, virtually all Congress, is out of touch. That they feed upon themselves. And that's why, while we have the administration and President Bush with the lowest approval ratings ever, we have Congress not too far behind. And they just don't get it. They don't get it. And they're really there to subsidize these corporations, as you're talking about, whether it's the oil companies or whether it's these financial institutions or the hedge funds or investment bankers. They bail them out. And it's inconceivable because you said the reason why we're in this crisis is for one reason: foreclosures, people with unaffordable mortgages. So you would think that the easy, straightforward answer is stop the foreclosures, make these mortgages affordable, restructure loans like what NACA is doing by reducing interest rates to 5, 4, and 3%, lock them in, make the mortgages affordable. That's a better return than what these investors are getting, and they save hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs. But that's not what they do. They want to bail out the people that fund them. They want to bail out the people that they have dinner with, that they socialize with. That's who they're bailing out. But that's why the taxpayers are smart. They treat us as that we're stupid. They treat us in a patronizing way, but we're smart. We understand what they're doing, and now we have to hold them accountable.
Well, I in my in the article I just wrote for the Bohemian, I ventured the guess that the reason that legislation like this just chugs along and nobody says anything is because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac spent something like $120 million in the last decade alone for lobbyists. Now, they are quasi-government agencies. When they get into trouble, they like to pull that card out. Hey, we're government agencies. You got to save us. We're backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. They like to play that game. That we're issuing these securities. They're like government securities. They're kind of not. But the U.S. government's got to back them. At the same time, if they were a true federal agency, they wouldn't be allowed to lobby. And they wouldn't be allowed to lobby to the tune of $120 million a year, which is more than the number one defense contractor, General Electric, spends. What's going on?
Well, let me tell you a quick story that just reinforces what you're saying. I testified a number of years ago in the House Financial Services Committee. The chairperson at that point was a Republican, Congressman Baker. And we got there, and we were testifying against Fannie and Freddie and their involvement in the subprime lending. We get there, and the actual hearing is at 11 o'clock. We get there at 8 o'clock, and there's a huge line of people to get into the hearing. Turns out that what they had done is that they'd gone to the homeless shelters, and they had all these homeless individuals standing in line. A half hour before the hearing, all of a sudden you see all the Fannie Mae staff there in line. They said, what happened? They paid $500 for each person to swap out themselves for a homeless person standing in line. That's what they did. So not only do they use their lobbying money to influence Congress, they pack the hearing room. They don't allow the public to get into the hearings.
Wow.
That's how insidious this is.
That's criminal. Incidentally, I misspoke a second ago. I said $120 million. That's $170 million for lobbyists spent in the last decade. And last week in my show, I made the point that this whole credit crisis reminds me. I used the metaphor of mad cow disease. That the reason the credit crisis is so insidious is because everything is related to everything else. Every trading partner on Wall Street is enmeshed with every other trading partner. The reason why Bear Stearns was bailed out to the tune of $30 billion was because they had a portfolio of swaps and derivatives that linked them with every other major Wall Street institution to the tune of $2.5 trillion.